Hello fellow sim racers, and welcome to the full-length version of my coaching session with Nils Naujoks. For those that don't know, Nils is one of the fastest guys around in Assetto Corsa Competizione, as well as being the team manager for Red Bull Racing Esports, G2 Esports, and as you're about to see, he also does some one-to-one coaching for sim racers. Now, there's a lot of valuable detail in here, so I hope you guys get something from this video. As for me, I'll be showing you just how much Nils' input helped with a hot lap at the end of the video to demonstrate just how much quicker I was able to go after the tuition. So here we are in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Nils has taken a look at my laps, my data. So Doctor, tell me, how bad is it?
It's not bad at all. We'll certainly be able to spot a few patterns, as I usually do with most people, and we're all about finding just a tiny bit of time in every corner. It's easier to approach it that way than looking for where are my 2 seconds. So yeah, we are going to run through your lap just full speed. I'll take a look at the, bigger, easier to spot patterns, and then we'll go through the lap once more, corner by corner, in more detail.
Sure, this is the easy bit. I like the straight. That's the easy bit.
That was the first thing, for example. Until here, looks fine. Fine too. And that will be something that we can look into through the, whole of the corner, basically.
It's always turn 3, isn't it?
It's a tricky one, yeah. Yes, here will be something too. To spot, and really something that you can change. And will be quite easy, I think, for you. Yeah, similar pattern maybe. I can already see a few things, right?
You're building me up to something here, aren't you?
Of course. That was a good one. Not aggressive enough maybe, but not too much to adjust there. I guess that's also about fine.
So high brakes.
Yeah, looks more like maybe the slow corners or the mid-speed corners. But it really only starts to show when we look at where you lose the time, what we can see in the data. There's certainly the same pattern, yeah.
We've cheated because you've already shown me the graph, so I know where some of the worst bits are.
It was consistent throughout the lab. I think it will be interesting for you to see where it really starts to become a lot. Okay, I guess this is it. I spotted a few things that I will be able to point out to you. First thing would be, and that's something I also learned while watching others, especially Amir in this case, is that the Mercedes has such a wide ref range that you can basically go to the ref limiter in any gear. And I saw you, if I just slow it down a bit, I'm going to try to avoid the sound all the time of the game. I saw you shifting up somewhere when the dash starts blinking, or just a tiny bit into it. But what the Mercedes wants is just stay in 5th gear. I think Amir stayed in 5th gear on Monza all the way, never used 6th, just because there's a little more power.
That's really interesting. That's something that I'd thought about actually, and particularly recently, just driving some laps, that it didn't seem to make a difference to lap time, but it feels counterintuitive running it hard against the rev limiter.
Yeah, I think it's very Mercedes specific. It's similar to some of the turbocharged cars in the game where you really have to go very high in the ref range because the next gear is going to be in very low RPMs and then you get some sort of turbo lag. So you have to max out there. But the Mercedes just works different than all the others with its natural aspirated engine there.
So for the viewers then, that's presumably only a very small advantage over the lap doing that. What are we talking? Are we talking half a tenth over a lap, a tenth, or is it more, do you think?
You can do it in every gear, right? From
course,
second, third, fourth. So it will add up, especially in qualifying when the car becomes lighter. Let's say tenth and a half or so over the course of a lap on Barca. I think more on Monza because you're so long in the straight.
But that's free lap. It's free lap time though, isn't it? So that's a nice easy one. Yeah, like it.
So I just run it forth to the point that I wanted to look at next. And while I can see you drifting to the left here, and trying to make use of as much track as possible, I'm pretty sure there will be just a couple more centimeters, right? If we're trying to look for every detail now, then we really want to point this out that even though you're trying to max out, there's probably 5 to 10 centimeters more on the left side or so. And I mean, your eventual limitation is the track limit, right? So your right side tire can probably be as close to the white line as possible, and that would just lead to opening up this corner ahead a tiny bit more.
So that's actually a really interesting point. I am much better at finding the limits of the car on the other side because unlike everyone else on the rest of the planet, we drive right-hand side cars over here. So I found with the left-hand drive cars, finding the limits on the left-hand side of the car is much more difficult for me than the right. It's not as natural, even after thousands of hours driving sims.
I'm pretty sure we will see less Germans driving the Bentley than we see British people.
Yeah, for sure.
For the very same reason. I think this is a point where we go a bit into concept. So you're starting to turn in, and if we get the menu to disappear, we will see your driving inputs here as well. And as you start to turn in, you will release the brakes a little, so you're doing a little trail braking, and to me overall that already looks fine because you're trailing deep into you, and once you hit the curb, you are almost immediately out of the brake. So technique-wise, that's perfectly fine. Slow down a bit and move to that exact point. Again, same thing as in the braking zone. There's just additional track available, and if you're going, I mean, for a race, I wouldn't take the risk, but in a qualifying lap, certainly. And I use this camera a lot to just show it from above. That there's just probably half a meter or so, or even more.
So presumably you want to avoid that sausage curb there.
You want to avoid the sausage, but you want the green stuff
on the other side of it. Yeah,
exactly.
Fair point.
And the tire just about fits between the grass line and the sausage.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's some additional track for you to tap into, certainly. And then I think one important thing is to not watch or look at individual corners, but see corner combinations as a whole. So in this first sector here, you would have the first corner, the second, and the third, and it really ends at the braking zone for turn 4. That you want to see this as a unit. So when you think about where you want to gain the lap time, it's usually going to be the straight, because you're spending a lot of time on the straight and rather very little time compared in the corners. So what I'm on about is when entering here, you have to think about how you eventually will approach the straight exit of turn 3. And that will lead you to starting to make sacrifices in the two corners prior to turn 3 to carry as much speed to turn 3 and out of turn 3. And if we now just go a little further in your lap, we will see this looks fine. You're going a bit wide, maybe on the exit here out of turn 1, having a tiny bit sacrificed entry into turn 2. And now you have to lift a bit over the curb, which is fine to not trigger the traction control too much. But now I think it's about all right. You tried to do the sacrifice already. Do you see my mouse, by the way?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay, so some people do the error of using all the track available here on the right, and then they will have the sacrifice entry on turn 3. So they will, if we look at the data, they will likely gain time on me in the first two corners, but lose everything into turn 3 and onto the straight. So you're kind of making already the right attempt into the right-hander, sacrificing the corners before a little to open up turn 3. But I think the trouble you are having in this one is I sense some insecurity on entry.
Very, very much so, 100%. This is this turn 3 at Barcelona is it's always one of those corners that, you know, just how you set up for the entry determines so much when you can get back on the power. But there's so few visual reference points, so it's such a tricky corner. So yeah, the fact that you can see that I'm insecure before I've even turned in is very accurate and a bit spooky, if I'm honest.
So what I would do now is switch to Motec and zoom in a bit on turn 3 that we can see here, and I'll talk you through a bit because I know you can't see it in detail on your screen. So we have the straight that ends about here. Then there's the braking for turn 1. I think braking point-wise very similar. The graphs look very similar. For you even, maybe I should say that all your graphs are in color. On mine's are white for this comparison. So we can see your trail braking goes even deeper than mine, which is usually a good thing. But we can see some differences in terms of speed through the section already, right? So you can see that I'm going slower into turn 1, right? So the white line is below the green line, and the difference is quite big on turn entry. You're actually 13, 14 kilometers faster than I am. And this is what I said, that you were going a bit wide out of turn 1 and then sacrificing a bit in turn 2. And then you can see from turn 2, I'm already faster all the way through turn 3. So while you're quicker for, let's say, this area here between these two dots I'm trying to point out, you're faster there, but you're sacrificing a very much bigger area afterwards, where I'm going to be faster. So,
yeah, and I'm going to give a bit of a spoiler to the viewers. I think that's a pattern across the lap, because I saw that in a couple of other corners later on where I was perhaps trying to carry just a tiny bit too much speed into the apex and sacrificing a whole sequence of corners after it because of it.
Yeah, so if we bring up what Motec has is the time bar or the time delta that develops throughout the lap, we can see that initially you're even a tenth up into corner 1, but then it really starts to fade away from you through turn 2 and 3. And then while, of course, we enter the corner with, pretty much about the same gap, I'm a few hundreds ahead for maxing out more in the 5th gear, probably. So it's 3.5 hundredths, if you will. But then by the end of corner 3 and onto the straight ahead, we're looking at 3/10 already. So let's try to find how they come to be. And while we can see it easily in the speed trace, you can't just go faster, right? So we want to see what you have to change in your driving to actually get there. So if I look at this, we can see in corner 1, first the steering input, there's quite a difference. So let's say where my maximum input is around 90 degrees, and you just keep turning the wheel a tiny bit more. And assuming you had the aggressive setup as well?
It was based on the aggressive setup, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we're having pretty much the same base, and if you didn't touch the steering ratio, then we can really compare this.
Yeah, I haven't touched the steering ratio, so that's comparable.
Okay, great. So just shows that you pretty much turned 30, 40 degrees more in the wheel, and you will likely be above what the front tires can take. So willingly or not, you will have forced the car into some sort of understeer. So you're using, let's say, 105% of the turning capability of the car, which, translates to understeer. And that will put you wide out of turn 1 and sacrifice your entry into turn 2. And then, pretty much that initial error will develop further throughout turn 2 and 3. But you could have mitigated some of that with the lack of confidence that you had into turn 3. And now I think there's going to be a more tricky part about how to load the tires and really make use of what the car is capable of. So what I saw here for you is that you're going off throttle very early into the right-hander, whereas I'm throwing the car into it way longer and then going out of the throttle at a way later time. And essentially that means you're overslowing the car, and what you're doing is, and we will see this throughout the whole corner if you roll through now, is that you're staying on throttle like halfway through all the time, because you don't want the reaction of the car to go further to the inside yet. You're delaying the apex artificially, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you would release the throttle fully, then the weight of the car would move forward. You would get load on the front tires and get additional grip for turn-in. And that would allow you to go a lot faster, first of all. And you could also do something that you somehow did in the corner 1, turn a little too much if you feel insecure. Because if you feel insecure, it's usually because of the rear, not because of the front, right? Understeer is something we feel safe with. It's odd and we don't like it, but it's never going to make us crash. But having an oversteery car is something that is really hard to work with. So what I see is you're trying to reduce the harsh reaction of the car, if I'm right.
Yep, no, that's 100% correct. So what you're saying, essentially, because I'm lifting off early, there's a whole chain of events that are happening. I'm mitigating that by keeping a small amount of, actually quite a lot of throttle on. It's something I've noticed with the Mercedes. Obviously, you do have to make a huge use of that weight transfer because of the heavy engine out the front, maybe more so than some of the other cars in the game. So interesting that going into the corner timidly has that sort of chain of events. I guess it's amplified more at a turn like turn 3 where it goes on for so long.
Yeah, and let's go there in terms of data. And like this is the entry here to turn 3, and we can see that your red trail of the throttle is going down to, let's say, 50%, then going back in and out throughout the corner a bit. Whereas for me, I'm just going full throttle into the corner for just a little deeper, right? So at my turn in point, or at the point where I want the reaction of the front, I'm doing 172. And by this point in time, you can already see that from here to here, really, your speed doesn't change at all. Right? So how you slow down the car initially, and then you just keep it there for the whole duration of the corner. Well, I'm even accelerating into the corner somewhat, then reducing or going out of the throttle to get a harsh reaction of the car. But you can also see I'm kind of working around the very harsh reaction. So I'm going out of throttle, but I'm giving the time a little more to do that weight transfer. So I'm not going 0 to 100 to 0 in a tenth or so, but I'm kind of stretching that over.
So you're right. So just to sort of try and cement that a bit for, well, myself and for people watching, are you saying that you're actually trying to intentionally induce some of the lift-off oversteer to help rotate the car?
It's some sort of lift-off oversteer, so the front will pitch forward a bit, give me a little more downforce, but I'm also not trying to get everything out of it, because then the rear would get loose, right? So this is what you're trying to get away with, and I'm doing the same. I'm just more confident and getting the car closer to the rear stepping out, but I'm just tapping into the rotation capabilities without losing the rear.
And how much later did you lift off? I can't quite see the numbers on the resolution screenshot I've got.
So you're lifting off at 1,040 meters into the lab, and for me that would be 1,098, so about 50 meters.
Wow. That's a long way deeper into the corner. You're going to send me the replay file so I can actually look at that. And I'm going to do a side-by-side lap at the end of this video so people can see what that actually looks like. But 60 meters that's a long way.
Yeah. Okay, so you are the red dot, so you're on the inside line, and I'm the white dot. So you can see that on entry, where you're already lifting off, I'm just building speed way longer into the corner. Then I lift off and have a slowdown pretty much until here, and then I have a very narrow point where I'm actually going slow. So what I'm aiming for as a concept is I either want to be accelerating or decelerating, but it's very, very rare that I want to have a stable speed. And just by the amount of color change, we can see that your amount of speed change throughout the corner is a lot less than mine, which typically points to you not maxing out in one way or another. So what I would want you to do driving-wise is just try going in there faster and try to trigger that reaction of the front by going out of the throttle a little more immediate, and then really have some amount of coasting in the middle of the corner. Because if we would be looking at a comparison of throttle inputs right here, then we would see that you're always somewhat into the throttle in the light green area, whereas for me there's a bunch of white stuff, which means I'm really coasting there, doing nothing, just waiting for the car to scrap away the speed itself. And then picking up throttle for us, I would say that's pretty much the same point in time, more or less. But I think the exit for you will change a lot once you change the entry, and actually the entry in turn 1. That's where it all starts here.
It's interesting that the reason I'm keeping on a small, probably more throttle than I thought I was to avoid that sort of lift-off oversteer. But it's interesting to see that you're using that. So it's something that I use in slow corners or tighter corners, certainly a lot of the time in the Mercedes. But the thought of doing that at turn 3 is a little scary. But, I mean, the results are clear.
I think the idea is to carry more speed into it, go out of the... I mean, your target then is to go out of the throttle completely. That must be your target. But don't do it, like, rushed in a way. So you get the reaction of the front, but you don't get too much of it too quickly. So you're kind of delaying the load transfer onto the left front tire, so it does grip up, but not too suddenly. And that will stabilize the rear for you.
Yep, no, I mean, makes total sense. I suspected when we recorded this that turn 3 would turn up some interesting things, and it certainly has.
And you can see if we check the traces here of the speed, then mid-corner we're like 15 kilometers apart. And then this changes as I slow down the car later. And then pretty much where we both go into the throttle, we match in terms of speed. So in this instance, you're really losing all the time in turn 3 and not so much on the straight as I see often with other people.
Yeah, I'm good at putting my foot on the throttle. It's just not so much taking it off.
Yeah, and I think you could even have a harsher reaction of the car if you were off throttle and went back into the throttle back to 100% rather quickly, as I do here, right? So it just goes up to 100% rather quickly. There's a slight delay in there, but I'm asking a lot from the rear tires, which I just want extra rotation, right? The car has a lot of downforce at 150, 160, and I can really ask as much from the rear. But then if I would just slam it, I might get the oversteer and trigger the traction control. So I'm trying to work around that.
It's interesting you say that. I'm looking at the steering trace, and it looks like I maybe got a little bit of oversteer as I was doing that, which is why I didn't continue to go.
Yeah, but that's probably just because you're also a little bit slower and the car is just in a way different state. The tires aren't loaded the same way as they are for me, right? I'm always on the edge of the front tire. And now if I go into the throttle, the front tire is just going to remain in that slight understeer zone. Whereas for you, you weren't maxing out on the tire in the first place. And if you then go into the throttle, there's capacity for the front to develop grip and the rear to step out. First of all, yes, here you do it better with maxing out on the available track. But we will see, and it will be more visible when you go into my replay, is that this braking zone here for turn 4 is actually not straight. And we can see if we roll through it slowly, you're pretty much braking in a straight line. And you're kind of drifting towards the outside of the black ideal line that Kunos has thankfully painted for us already. So if we look at this from above, you can see that like this is the ideal line here, and you're almost outside of it.
Now this is something that I've noticed before actually, is that I do have a tendency to try and take a slightly later apex, particularly for some of these longer corners, whereas watching the pros do it, there's a tendency to want to really get the nose in early to some of these corners, and I guess that's what's happening here.
Yeah, and what you're doing is, since you're braking straight, you're braking really hard, and I would actually flip back to Motec to see that and focus a bit on the brake trace this time around. So you're again color, and I'm white, and first thing we can see is my braking point is quite a bit later. So looking down here, 1612 is where you start, and for me it's going to be about 12-15 meters later. So just, I mean, at that speed, we're talking a tenth or so, right? It's not much. But then, again, similar pattern to turn 3. You're slowing down through a certain speed, and then you're keeping it, right? Indicated by the green line being nearly horizontal. Whereas for me, I keep decelerating the car down to very late in the corner. So while you're saying you're trying for a late apex, you do this in the form of on track with the car position, but you're not putting a late apex in terms of speed.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, no. Get it, yeah.
So what you're doing is you're overslowing the car in entry, and now the speed difference is even bigger on turn-in. We're looking at 21 kilometers now, roughly. And that will lead to you basically you have the speed that you need later on in the corner way too early. And what you wanted to do is keep decreasing speed up until maybe here later in the corner, and you already have the perfect speed for there by now. So you're just giving away something where you could be traveling faster onto this point back there. So if we roll through it now, let me speed it up a little. We can see line-wise, I think that's perfectly fine, but we can see again that you're always in the throttle, kind of correcting for the initial too slow entry speed, and you're just staying at a stable pace throughout the corner.
Yeah, so very much the same issue as turn 3, but with the added sort of complexity of the fact that I'm trying to brake in more of a straight line than I need to be.
And I can probably point out a little bit more here. So what you're doing right is you're trying to match your braking release with the amount of turning that you do, which is needed, right? Because the front tire only can take so much power, so much forces. And once you start turning, you kind of have to release the brake, else some force is going to give or force the car to give way, some sort. But what you're doing is you're slowing down while you're just not maxing out, or once you're out of the brake, you're not maxing out on the front tire anymore. So if you would do so, you would, again, similar pattern, you would just end up on the grass on the inside if you would ask as much as from the car as is available. So what you want to do concept-wise is keep the front tires on that ideally 101% grip level just to force a little understeer. So brake more as you, or let's say keep on a higher braking level for longer. And then as you really start to reach the maximum amount of your turning, making the transition from braking to turning and always staying at that 100% level requires a little different way of matching your pedal work to your steering work.
There's sort of two problems there, you're saying, in the sense that because I am not carrying the speed in, I'm not able to load up the front tyres, so I'm having to compensate for that by doing stupid things like keeping the throttle further in, which is creating this sort of half state of not really accelerating, not really decelerating, and just having to wait for the next bit of the corner to happen.
Exactly. So basically you are ready very early for a later point in the corner. And now there's just several seconds for you of waiting going on, where you're 20, 30% into the throttle, just burning fuel because you're not going any faster, right? So your speed is about 120 something throughout the corner, and there isn't much change to it while you're still in the throttle. I would assume that you actually have more fuel usage than I have, just because you're spending more time on throttle.
Yeah, and that's a big problem in the Mercedes as well. So
yeah, then eventually you will have to do more laps in the second engine mode, right, to save more fuel on the longer stint. But let me go back to this track map, because I think it might reveal the whole thing a little better. So we can see you're again the red dot on the inside line. You're braking earlier, we knew that already, and you're decreasing the speed well into the blue zone rather early in the corner. And then you're just staying at that light blue, a little more blue throughout the whole corner. Whereas for me, I just stay faster for way longer and then have like my slowest point way more pronounced. So middle of the corner, I'm actually going slower than you. I think concept-wise for you is you want to match your visible apex where the car is on track to your apex in terms of speed. So you want to be the slowest where you are the closest to the inside curb. And usually you don't want to be at the inside curb for 5 seconds or so, right? So you want to have your speed matched to the closeness to the curb in a way. And you have, with the speed you have the potential to be close to the curb right from the beginning. Right, so you're just delaying that apex artificially by going into the throttle again, whereas you could still tap into decelerating of the car and just coasting into the corner a bit.
So, okay, this is going to be a difficult question. It's difficult to understand exactly what you need to do just to carry that little bit of extra speed in towards the apex. So what is it specifically I need to do in the driving or my head, perhaps, to get to that point?
So in your head, I think that the most easy to understand and translate to the track is you want the car to be a tiny bit too fast, like 1% too fast. So you will always be in that safe zone of understeer. And I mean, this could be a driving style thing, but I think for most people it will work out. So you want to be a tiny bit too fast and always inside the corner, never have the need to accelerate before you actually approach the exit. So for you as a driver and watching yourself as you practice after the session will be force yourself to not use the throttle up until very late in the corner where you can really accelerate. And every time you have to keep the speed, you know you have been being too slow initially. So you have to, rather than working up to the speed from the bottom, I want you to work your speed down from above the ideal speed a bit.
So intentionally get it into the understeer territory and then back it off. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And you can see while you're correcting your speed with the throttle in the middle of the corner, I'm correcting with the brake, right? So I'm trailing the brake into it, then I'm coasting a bit, and I see, okay, I need to get just a tiny bit closer to the curb. I'm carrying a little too much speed, so I tap into the brake that's probably not more than 10% or something here. And then just make a tiny speed correction on the brake rather than on the throttle. So that will allow me to then just coast a bit and let the car work out itself, not unsettling it with the throttle, not putting it in a weird state where it doesn't max out on the grip level available. I'm always relying a lot on the front tire if I'm decelerating and turning, whereas you're kind of using both fronts and rears more equally and basically not maxing out either of them.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good explanation. That's very clear to me, at least.
That's great. I'm always happy to try more explanations. Let's move one corner further. And you see, there's so many details to talk about, and I know why these sessions take up a fair amount of time.
Yeah, well, this is. I'm going to have to work out how to edit this down into a palatable video because this is all great stuff.
So this looks, first of all, you're definitely maxing out on the track available, but it seems to me, and it might be more pronounced again with the camera above, is you're really on the outside verge of where the ideal line is painted by Kunos, and it's always a great reference where you want to be with a car. And then as we move along, let's watch your brake and throttle inputs right there. I think you will have overslowed the car already again.
Yeah.
And now, let's see how it works out. Yeah, and now the car starts rotating in, right? You feel that you would clip the apex and even the grass. So you go into the throttle to stop the car from decelerating, which just means you have decelerated too much already.
Yeah.
So it's the same pattern pretty much as in the corner before. You want to ask more from the front tire again and asking the car to decelerate over the front tire, scrap that speed away a little by being, 1-2 kilometers too fast or so. And let's find the representation of that in the data again. Because line placement wise, again, you're perfectly fine, right? The apex is in the right place, the entry is about in the right place. And here especially, I think we can see a difference in the braking pattern. And I think here it's really pronounced what I said earlier, that you want to match your amount of braking to the amount of turning to always ask the right amount of the front tire. So what you are doing up until this point here is you're fully on the brakes and you're starting to turn, which very likely will lead to the front tire being overloaded and giving you a sense of understeer. Am I right?
Yep.
And now you're like, okay, the car is understeering, and I really want to get into that corner now. And then you release the brake rather quickly and give away or allow the front tire to grip up and translate everything into turning all of a sudden. And that will probably lead to the next insecurity, which is, okay, now the fronts grip up suddenly, and you have fear of the rear stepping out, which is probably why you overall reduce the speed to stabilize the car by going slower.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like what's gone on there. I'm actually struggling to see the point where, just due to the resolution of the screen share we've got, I'm struggling to see the point at the moment where I actually applied the brakes.
I think the point we apply is, it couldn't be more similar, really.
Right, so yeah, I'm trail braking a little bit slower than you are into it. Is that, so that's where the, oh no, it's not, I'm looking at the throttle trace, sorry, yeah, okay. So you're actually trail braking. I'm braking much harder than I perhaps had before.
Yeah, so again, you're a bit overslowing, and then you're, okay, I want to turn in now, and then the car is already, I mean, looking here, it's probably 10, 12 kilometers that you're going to be slower, and then you turn in, and then, oh, damn it, I'm too slow already, I have to pick up the throttle to not end up on the inside curb or grass even again. So similar pattern, I carry more speed into it, and then we match later again. So on throttle, everything is similar again, out of the corner, just into it, carrying the speed into it. And the technique here is, you will see it with the screen grab I'm doing, is as I start to turn into this corner, let's say the brake graph going out of the brake is pretty much mirrored to the turning graph. So I'm always trying to be at this 100% or 101% level of the front tire. Whereas you're like, up until here, you're at 105, 110%, and then all of a sudden, you're going out of the brake and allow a lot of turning, so you're at, 95% of the tire, and everything can be translated into turning. That probably gives you the insecurity, because the rear can't keep up with the amount of grip the front end has.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That's not the sort of normal mistake I make. So I get the impression that I actually thought that I'd braked a little bit late there, and was perhaps for a half a tenth there just panicking a little bit, which is, it's unlike me to come off the brakes that hard in a slow corner. So Yeah, and I think you're right. That's going to have created an insecurity, which I'm correcting with the throttle. As I didn't realize I was correcting so much on the throttle. That's that's a bad habit I need to get out of.
Let me just roll back because there's another thing that I can point out in this corner is, and you're going really far to the outside, trying to max out on the space that you have, but by this point in time, and you're already braking, you're kind of braking towards the outside of the track, and you're right now aiming for the grass, and now you're having to turn, and that's probably unsettling the car just a tiny bit, giving you a sense of you're kind of at the limit. Whereas you could have brought the car across a little earlier and rather brake in the straight line here. And then what I want you to notice is, and you'll see in the replay that I'll send you later, is if we go from above, let me place the camera right here, more like this, that you're staying on outside really, really long and turning in rather late into the corner. And for me, it will rather look like I'm starting to turn more and more and more and more until here, and I'll just pass you on the inside probably here, and our line will match roughly from this point in time. And you're coming far from the outside and trying to put one late apex. And the main difference we're doing is I will have some sort of double apex approach in this corner. So I'm going tight here. I think here's the first tight point for me. Then I'm drifting a little to the outside, carrying more speed, and then we will match speeds. I'm coming back to the inside for some sort of second apex, straightening the car up for the straight ahead. Whereas you're aiming for like a long late apex about here, I assume.
Yeah, no, I mean I definitely am. That's what I'm intending to do. I think part of the turn-in issue there was that I got very close to the grass and just lost a little bit of confidence because it's so easy to put a tyre on the grass. So, and that's compromising the entire line from that point because I'm having to turn in more right when I'm on the curb.
It's a really tricky corner for the reason that the radius of the corner changes multiple times throughout the corner. It's hard to notice because when we're driving along there, it's just a weird corner. But it kind of opens and closes again, some sort. So you have a radius of, I don't know, let the radius be 200 meters or so, then it closes down to a radius of 150 or 100 meters, then opens up to 170, 180 meter radius, and then comes back tight to, 120 meter radius or so. And that is what gives people, makes it difficult to have like the average right radius in this corner because the corner changes so much throughout, as you go along.
So it's interesting. One of the things I've picked up here is how small mistakes, not even the right word, but a small decision made in the very early stages of a corner is paying, how the consequences of that play out throughout the rest of it. So in this case, where I'm turning in just across the curb and a little late, I'm then compensating by coming off the brake very hard because I've panicked a little bit, and then I'm trying to do the thing that I always apparently do and overcompensate with the throttle. It's causing all sorts of issues throughout the corner, and it's only when you slow it down like this that you can really see just what those tiny little details, what a difference they make.
I really want to suggest to everyone to always watch your own lap. I mean, if you're lacking lap time, watch your own lap from different angles because the cockpit view is always kind of locked in. And in the sim, great opportunity. And I saw that when coaching the real drivers, that they're like, oh man, that's such an interesting angle that we're never going to have. We don't have a chase cam in the real car.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you want to know whether you're using all of the track width or not, it's perfect. And you can, it's something else I've noticed when you're using the free view camera to move above, you can actually see the attitude of the car, whether it's oversteering or understeering. You can actually see quite a lot more than you'd probably think.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Let me do one more thing for that corner, and I want to see where, let's say, where you pick up the throttle and you stay stable for quite an amount here at 6% throttle, very precise there. And then as you start to increase, because that matches with the point where I'm still braking. So let's match that with the video, slow it down and see where you move away from the 6% to higher percentage. And that would be here. So if we go above now, again.
That is very early in the corner, isn't it? Wow.
It's very early where you start increasing throttle. This is the point where I stop braking.
Yeah.
right? So I trail the brake into, like, let's say from here, I start to release the brake a little and start to turn more and more and more. And at this point in time, I will be out of the brake and near my maximum turning angle, and probably be in that slight understeer zone, asking 101, 102% of the tire, and just let the car coast a bit to get rid of the excess speed that I still have. And that probably lasts until here or so. And then I can just pretty much go flat out with a throttle. Whereas for you, it will look a lot more progressive, right?
Yeah, I'm usually nice and smooth with the inputs.
I mean, it's perfectly, like, you're perfectly smooth, but I think you're not asking enough weight transfer for the car, not loading up the rears as much as they could take. And it's a thing even with my teammate Arthur, that we have a different pattern in throttle application. He's just a lot smoother than I am, and I'm just forcing everything out of the car immediately. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this one, I think you did that well. You're not carrying as much speed on the exit because you gave away some track available. Using the inside curb perfectly fine with the Mercedes. Again, this little throttle thing, but in this corner is not as important to avoid it. But there's certainly, I think we go a lot more on the right side here of the sausage curb again. Yeah. And that just allows you more track, and you will see if you aim for that, you will immediately feel, okay, I could have gone into the throttle earlier, just use more track, carry more speed up the hill, because going uphill, usually every kilometer counts even more. But that's a tiny thing that's easier to adjust. I think the line-wise was right, braking seemed all right, no biggies there. I think the next one will have a little more information. So what you do right, and now you ask, like, this turn-in reaction, you demand it from the car, right? That you go out of the throttle completely, let the car pitch forward to get the load transfer, load the front tires up, make them turn in. And you even have a very slight amount of braking into this corner, which I guess in the data will look very similar for me. So yeah, you're here, the white one going out of the... sorry. You're the colored one. So you're going out of the throttle and you have fair amount of braking going on you for quite a long time. This is usually a very nice trail you can do through this corner. You always keep the front tire loaded, which is a good approach. The difference here, I think, is that, just probably from experience, is that I have way more confidence with the car again. So I just throw it in way more. I do the same thing, right? Go out of the throttle quickly, ask a reaction, tap the brakes a little bit, but then throughout the whole corner, I do nothing anymore, right? There's throttle corrections even going on, so I was lying. So whereas I was telling you before, if you have to make a correction in the corner, use the brake. In this one, I'm doing the opposite. But it's not necessarily the right thing. You're having the right approach. I think we're matching in terms of where we put the apex of speed and where we put the apex of car placement in that corner. For me, it's probably... It's always a tricky one here to find the exact thing. So I'm carrying more speed through the corner, and we are... I mean, you're even earlier in the throttle than I am. Then have to lift off to not get the track limit at the end. Let me check once more. Sometimes things are harder to spot than others. Let me roll through the corner. So braking a bit there. Then waiting. Yeah, you're already in the throttle there. Okay.
Imagine that.
I think in this one it could just be a timing thing, really, and then it could look different on another lap that you did. So ideally, of course, is you just don't have to lift off once you committed to the throttle. And the way I do it is just in the data. I'm just later in the throttle here.
Yeah.
So I'm letting the car roll a bit longer, get away with that excess speed, but carry, I mean, similar pattern to before. I just carry a little more into it, let the car roll a bit, and then, wait until I hit the speed and apex on track, and then go into the throttle. The trace is really similar here.
I think I don't have a good visual reference for turn 7 at Barcelona about where I want to get into the throttle, so I'm doing it more about feel.
Are you on triple setup or ultra wide, or what do you?
I'm just on a normal 32-inch single monitor because ultra wides aren't doing very well for the video, and triple screens made everything much harder to do the type of stuff I do. So yeah, easy way out for me, because I can't spot much more, is what the difference between us is. Throttle application, first of all, looks very similar. Like if we moved this a couple meters, it would be the perfect similar line almost.
The difference is that I do it later, and I decrease my speed for longer to a tiny bit later point in the corner, but therefore carry more speed into it for longer and then just wait till a later point where we go.
I'm being
a bit greedy on the throttle application, and then, as you can see, I'm the red trace, so I'm having to back out.
It could have worked if you might have been harsher even, asking a little oversteer from the car, and then the exit wouldn't be as compromised for you, and the car wouldn't understeer away into the gravel there. I mean, it's not a big issue, right? I'm just braking a little less probably than you do. That's the only difference, and carry those 4 or 5 kilometers more into the corner, and then wait a tiny bit longer, but then be more confident on the throttle and don't have to make the correction, right? I think the lift off is your biggest problem here.
It does look like I needed the little lift off on the curve at the end. There wasn't a lot of
because it's really the time delta here. It stabilizes up until the point where you lift, right? So there you would have kept at 9/10, but then as you lift, I just build a speed gap that you can never gain back onto the straight, and from those 9/10 at the next braking zone, we're looking at just 1.5 tenths lost there on the straight, where you can't really do anything about it anymore. I think your hairpin actually looked good, and we can see a little trade-off here is you gain time back on entry, so you're pretty much going faster into it, and I focus more on the exit, so let's take a quick look there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. This is one that I saw in the data, and I looked at it and I thought, I shouldn't be going that much quicker than you on the way in. But because it's such a short run down to the right-hander afterwards, I guess
it can pay off. It can pay off, definitely. I mean, let's see what we're talking about. So I always look at where we apply the brakes. So 1.06 seconds is what you're behind, and then next braking zone is where I compare to. And that's, just a tenth loss there, right? It's not much, but I think there's something to find by changing the approach a bit, by focusing more on the exit. Because if we just, it's going to be tiny, but you'll see on my recording later is, let's say this is the amount of time you're going quicker. And then my amount of time going quicker is all this again. So it's just visually already in the data more where I'm faster. So it seems just changing that trade-off a tiny bit towards focusing more on the exit than getting quickly into that corner. So let me roll it through for a second. Braking point looks fine to me, and then trailing out of the brake. Yeah, it just seems you're not going even deep, right? I might have the apex a little bit later. Let me just try to get that second back and then go to the...
It looks like, to me, it looks like I'm turning in earlier, ever so slightly earlier than maybe I should be.
Yeah, I'm trying to view it from above where you actually are the closest to the curb, and then we can see from above what the actual difference between us is. So that is your closest point. And if we go from above now, that's actually a little, I would say, let's go closer maybe, a little before the actual middle of the corner, which I would see here somewhat.
Yeah.
And for me, the apex will rather be about here or so. So delaying that closest point in the corner by about, a car length, so to say. And then it will be straight more for the straight, and then you can pick up the throttle harsher, carry a little more speed into the next.
So would you do that by turning in slightly later? Carrying more speed
ask
through?
data.
Yeah, let's ask data.
So by the looks of it, I'm getting the rotation done even a lot earlier, and I'm getting the rotation done on the throttle a lot because I pick it up way earlier.
Yeah.
So it's not by turning in later. I think I'm also the brake trail looks different. We would have to have the replay side by side, I think, for this one to really spot it. But I can see I'm having oversteer on the exit, so I guess I'm just asking more of the rear tires, and I can see the traction control kicking in here a little earlier for me as well. So relying a bit on the technology in the car to help me out there. Yeah, actually, I need you to be done with braking a little bit earlier, then let the car rotate on its own.
Yeah, I'm carrying too much speed in again. Well, no, actually, it's not been enough in general. This is the one where I've been carrying too much in, and I think that happens again at the end of the lap as well. I think.
So the braking point wise, I'm a bit early here, and that's about 2-3 meters or so, and I think they can already make the difference there. So braking a little earlier, getting the car rotated a bit earlier, get it straightened up a little earlier. But overall, I think the braking trace looks fine. It's just that what you should avoid, I think, is going down, going back up with a brake, because it indicates you have been, there was some issue along the lines, right?
Yeah, it does.
You still want to match it with your turning input, which is what you do. Just here, kind of go out too much and then back in. Little more smooth transition from the brake to the brake to the turning in this one, but I spotted way more in the long right-hander. I think this is where you lose a little more time. And let's move forward in the replay for this one. So what you kind of have the right idea. Let me catch my voice. Kind of have the right idea by you trying to flick the car to the left and get a wider entry into this one. And the difference that you will see when you look at my replay later is, again, you will have to throttle. We can't see it right now, but it's all the way your 30% throttle. And then having just one apex late in the corner is what you're aiming for, I assume?
Yes, yeah.
And for me, let me go to that point. Okay, right here, I will be not aiming here for the grandstands or for wherever the marshal will be, but my car will be pointing more towards there, and I'll have again some sort of double apex approach in this corner, similar to turn 5, the hairpin, the left hairpin. So all the difference that's going to happen is, and I think we'll see that best in the track map again, is I will be close to the curb inside the corner, then drift away from the curb a bit, and then come back close later again. Whereas for you, you're trying to get a wide entry, and then you'll have a very stable speed. Just look at how your speed develops through the corner. You're just slowing down a little here. Now you're staying stable pretty much in terms of speed, just slowing down very little. Whereas for me, if we look at the data, the speed trace will again be way more pronounced in the sense that it goes up and down faster. So let's look at Motec there. Go to turn number, what's it called? Number 9 is actually the left kink is a corner in Motec. So number 10, it is that you overslow the car again, then stay stable, right? We can see this plateau somewhat in the data again. And I just go in quicker, clip the inside curb once, then drift a bit wide, slow down the car to a second later apex, and then have the car straightened a bit earlier and can tap into more throttle, making the same thing as before, asking more in terms of weight transfer of the car, loading the tires up a little more. Yeah, we can see this here, like you're braking 100%, and that will probably, as we're turning all the time in this corner, will lead to you having this sensation of understeer again, probably, because you're overloading the front with 100% brake and turning. So line-wise, I want to show you from above probably, is that corner. I mean, did you know it's a 180-degree corner?
Yeah. I mean, it sort of feels like I've experimented in the past with making it more sort of a V-shaped line around it, but could never really make it go any quicker. And I suspect that is because of my tendency to want to use the throttle to sort of balance the car and
yeah, I don't think you want to use the throttle. It just appears to you that it's the only thing you can do right now, because else you would drive along here somewhere in the grass.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. This is something I've not noticed until it's been pointed out to me, and now I can't help but notice it. So hopefully that translates from looking at this to driving the car when I get to do that this afternoon. And, hopefully that translates to my foot rather than just my brain.
I guess it will. This corner is special because it has some sort of banking towards the outside. So you kind of drift away even more in this corner. It feels like it at least. And the opposite, but also very similar corner would be the Dunlop corner on Nürburgring, right? You would have a similar 180-degree shape, a little slower, but you will also have a first apex and then that V shape throughout the corner. Looking like a pronounced way, right?
The banking at Dunlop's is very pronounced, so that's a corner where it feels very natural to do that. Whereas this is a wider radius and the banking's less pronounced. So I've struggled to make that work. I'll be very interested to see. Well, we can see in the data that it works, but I'll just be interested to see what that looks like when it manifests itself in.
I'm saying it's a V shape, right? And I'm painting this kind of in here, but on track it will rather be being close here, and being the far away point of the curb won't be more than a meter or so. So the V is this is the furthest away point of the curb here. And then the next 3 corners, so the next 90-degree right, and the...
We don't need to talk about these corners, Nils, because they shouldn't be there. We should just have one more corner, turning right onto...
Yeah, I always remember the last 2 corners of being the corners where Rossi passed Lorenzo in 2009. Yeah. That's like the most, I don't know, daring move I've ever seen someone do on a motorcycle.
But it's okay, they've ruined the circuit now, so let's work. But it is the area it's probably the hardest area of the circuit to drive, for me at least.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. The track falls away from the car gets very light. You're into braking, have to accelerate quickly again, have to flick it over. So it's very technical. So it's easy to lose a lot of time there. And let me stop it actually at the entry where you hit the brakes. You're making use of all the tracks, so perfectly fine there. We have to view all 3 corners ahead as a unit, because if you sacrifice something, or let's say if you go too quick through this one, you're going to end up wide, won't be able to get it across for the chicane, won't be able to get it across for the second part of the chicane, and then lose all the time on the straight. So similar to corner 1, 2, and 3, where I told you to look at the straight or have the straight in mind already, I need you to do the same for this one basically. So let's maybe roll it through a little. Let's see how you kind of make the sacrifices throughout the section. Going in there already on the throttle again, okay. Not clipping the curb, you definitely want to have that because it gives you some sort of additional rotation.
I'm afraid of sausages.
Yeah, maybe you need to drive the Bentley around here and then you can get closer to this one. Let's see where the car ends up. So it seems like you're drifting very far to the outside here, right? Almost going to that curb. And now you're just having trouble getting the car on the right side, on the outside, before having to flick it in for the left-hander. And you will end up not braking in the straight line here, pretty much. So yeah, trying to get it over. And now you're running out of time, right? So you start braking in a way that you can't brake a lot because you still have to do a lot of turning. Let's assume the entry of the chicane is 90 degree. Then what you have to do in terms of turning now has become essentially 130 degree. So what I need you to do in this one is sacrifice a little more of the corner before and get the car across more easy to the right side here. And then you will have a straighter car here already and don't have to do so much turning on the brake. You kind of work it out in a way, but I guess it will just be way harder for you to keep the speed up through the chicane and then put the power down early here for the straight. And I guess most of the time here will be lost. If you can see it here already. Let me zoom in there a bit to the section. That all the time you're losing onto this main straight here.
Yeah.
So if we look at the section as a whole, where the first braking point is, you're 1.3 seconds down, and at the end of the lap or that section, you're 1.6, 1.7 seconds behind. So
I knew it was going to be. I knew it was going to be turns sort of 1, 2, and 3 in the chicane where the big time loss were, but it hurts to see it drawn in a graph.
Yeah, so how do we do it differently? First of all, you brake very hard for the first right-hander, forcing the car probably into some sort of understeer. Then you release the brake too much to get the front to grip up and turn. And by that point in time, you will have made the car unstable in a way. And then you'll pick up the throttle again to keep the speed up. But the main thing here is, what we can see this time, is you're carrying more speed through this right-hander, which is why you end up wider on the exit. And if we just click into here, we're talking, it looks small in the graph, but we're talking 7-8 kilometers that I'm going slower than you do, just to make that sacrifice on the exit and get the car across for the chicane. So you're even in the data, at least, right? From here, you're gaining time back initially. And then as we, like on the short straight between the right-hander and the chicane, I'm picking up way more throttle, and I'm like 8-9 kilometers faster at the braking point. And I'm also then braking later and sacrificing a lot in the left-hander of the chicane to then focus solely on the exit onto the main straight. So I don't think your line is wrong or anything. I think you should just change. If you change the right-hander, top of the hill, everything else afterwards will just change naturally for you. And then again, probably same thing. You're tapping into the 100% braking rather harshly, so your car won't be able to rotate. And you still have to do, as we pointed out, a lot of more rotation than I have to do, because you have have such an angle in the car pointing to the outside of the track. Let's roll it back a tiny bit, right? So I'm talking about this point here where you're really trying to get outside of the track limits here right now. And then you put the brakes down to 100% rather quickly, and now you won't have any turning capabilities in the car while being fully on the brakes. And that will just make you think while driving it that as you go along here, man, I can get the car to turn. I have to become slower and slower and slower. I need to drive slower. I need to slow down because I can't get it to turn in. And if you would be, in this case, more gentle on the brake as I'm here, so matching the braking again with the amount of turning I'm asking, you will have more grip available on the front to rotate the car. And you can also see that as I'm braking earlier, I'm at the apex of the left-hander. So going into here, and this is where we open up, 11 kilometers slower, or even 12, 13 in the left-hander of the chicane, which sounds quite a lot, right? It's a big sacrifice I make to just get the car into here, flick it across this left side curb that you kind of avoided probably because you feared the sausage again, which is fine. I mean, it's not too bad, not too much. But now you're running just a tiny bit wide for the right-hander. And then you have to slow down the car more to get over with the right hand, and then have to wait a little more to get the power down. And I think this is where the main time loss in the section will come from.
Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned 11 kilometers an hour being, quite a lot of a sacrifice, but it's also worth pointing out that that's 11 kilometers an hour in what is the slowest corner on the track, probably as well. So that's
exactly. So it's going to be a short amount of time.
Yeah, no, it's a big thing to do. Well, I mean, you can see in the graph just how much being able to get on the throttle earlier for the final part of the turn. Is it turn 13? Is turn 13 the right-hander?
Yeah. So what we see here, this is the start of we are right in the left-hander here now, and then you can see as I have sacrificed so much on the entry for the left-hander, I can really pick up the throttle completely in the transition to the right-hander, which leads to an additional thing. I get harsh reactions from the car. As I go into full throttle, I can get the rear out a bit, get the car rotate additionally a bit. And as I go out of the throttle from full throttle, I get a huge weight shift to the front again, get the fronts loaded up, and can take the right-hander of the chicane a little bit faster than you can, because you're not having this load transfer in the car. And then in the right hand of the chicane, I'm actually 12, 13 kilometers faster, and I never give away that speed advantage again, even though we're similar in throttle application.
Yeah, no, you keep that the entire way through, which over, I don't know how many meters that is, I can't see it from here, but it's got to be 400 or 500 meters or something for the rest of the lap. That's a big thing.
It's 410 or so.
There you go. Not a bad guess. I'll take that.
So yeah, I guess this is your lap. Overall, summing it up, there's a bit of more exit focus needed in some occasions. There's needed a bit more carrying more speed into the corner, not allowing yourself to make corrections on the throttle inside the corner, trying to get the speed aligned to, like the speed apex, as I want to call it, to the physical apex where you put the car on track, match those. And maybe try, I mean, it's not a big issue for you, but just a tiny bit, to match the steering input to the amount of braking, to always only ask as much from the tire as you want, and never go to this 105% something.
No, it's interesting because that is something I've tried to consciously work on as I've developed my own driving, is matching those inputs. But it's interesting, you can see in the data, because it doesn't lie, there are moments where what is fairly natural, and you can see it throughout most of the lap, it's fine, but there are problems when the car's right on the edge, particularly the big braking zones. It was into the hairpin and where into the final chicane, where I was obviously not prepared. I didn't have the car in the right position for the final corner, where I'm over braking and I'm really braking harder than I'm able to turn, and I'm making that mistake even though it seems fairly natural in the rest of the lap. So I think that's about even though that feels natural to me, I'm still trying to over brake at times to compensate for mistakes I've made elsewhere. And I guess that's the same with the throttle as well. So the problems are very much psychological, I think.
Yeah, it's all that, right? You induce some issue with a car that you can then kind of perceive as I don't know, as an issue with the car that you have to mitigate later on. So of course, a corner starts with a braking zone. That's common sense, but that's really an area of focus where I think a lot can be gained, because everything after the braking zone changes once you change something during the braking process. Yeah, as a comparison, the amount of full throttle throughout the lap, you actually have more. You're 84% full throttle, and I'm only 77%.
So, well, the first thing that strikes me there is that I'm using quite a bit more fuel to go 1.6 seconds slower.
Indeed, yeah.
Just based on that.
Yeah, and probably you have a longer time of full throttle because you're overslowing the car and have to bring the car back up to speed.
So I think that probably brings things to a bit of a close. There's lots I'm going to go away and focus on. But Nils, first of all, thank you so much for dedicating your time today to coaching me and giving me the opportunity to improve my driving. If anyone else in my audience wants to have a go at this themselves and see where they can find some time, how do they find you, and how can they get the process started?
So best to get in touch probably is either Twitter, or even better would be Discord. I guess I just dropped you the link for my Discord server, which is named after myself. And I think we just go from there. We have a lot of technological stuff going on in this Discord, have setups there. And yeah, I'm just way closer to everyone there than I would be on Twitter.
After the recording session, I went out and turned some laps to try and apply the lessons that Nils had taught me. After about 20 laps or so of practice, I was able to get my time down from a 1:45.1 to a 1:44.2, which is 9/10 of a second, which is pretty significant. In fact, the best sectors added up to 1:43.9, which was only about half a second off of Nils' reference time, which for someone like me is absolutely mega. And after having a day or two of being able to dwell on the lessons themselves and listening back while editing this video, the value in this coaching session was incredibly obvious to me, at least, and hopefully you guys have got something out of it too. Keep an eye out for a separate video where I'm going to be comparing my initial lap time to my improved lap time after tuition, as well as comparing that to Nils' reference lap. So that about wraps things up here. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, it would be great if you could hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can see more content like this in the future. So all that's left to say is goodbye, thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.